Welcome to Adventure Freaks, a podcast on living abroad on a budget. Hi, I'm Rami Assorti with Adventure Freaks, and I just wanted to thank you for tuning in and supporting our channel. If you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button, that red button below. It's the best way to support our channel. And thanks again for tuning in. All right, so today we are here with my special guest, and her name is Katherine Demsky, who lives in Nepal, Kathmandu, Nepal. And I've always been fascinated with this part of the world because it's got the largest mountains and most amazing hikes in the world, and there's a lot of incredibly beautiful temples there. And Katherine lives there. She's been living there for 8 years. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she's lived there for 8 years, and she's originally from Portland, Oregon, and she is the executive director of Bridges Between, and I'm going to let her talk more about what they do. And she is also a practicing Buddhist, and she is very engaged, involved in empowering women and developing the educational, I guess, systems there in Nepal, correct?
Well, we're offering ways out of poverty and by using education. So whether it's training or formal education, literacy, whatever a community actually needs.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And so you also have a master's degree in anthropology. And
Correct.
that is okay. So how did you land in Kathmandu? Tell us a little bit about your journey of, you got this fascinating journey of studying people, helping people, empowerment, and now you're a practicing Buddhism, and you're living in Kathmandu. How did you land there?
Well, like so many people who do live here, I came here as a trekker, and I was working at a community center in Denver, teaching rock climbing and volleyball, but really using the sports as an empowerment piece for women and girls. And my boss there, she's climbing the 7 summits, and she called me and she said, would you like to go and hike to Everest Base Camp to bring awareness to her nonprofit? That's why she was climbing, for her nonprofit, to raise money and awareness about breast cancer. So I came here and got a 4-month visa, as so many people do, and then it was just hard to leave. So I kept coming back, and then met this organization who asked me to take on director's role here in Nepal. So I've been here permanently now for 4 years.
Okay. Wow. So how many years ago was that when you first went on that trek?
The trek was 2013.
In 2013. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that experience like? Have you going up to Everest and for the first time? I mean, I've never even seen the mountain in person. So what was that like?
Well, it was really amazing, and it was an adventure of a lifetime for me. I grew up as an armchair mountaineer, like reading all of the books, all of the stories, kind of fantasizing about this place, this Shangri-La, and knowing all of the stories of the mountaineers. And so doing the hike was really emotional for me as well. Realizing some of the areas where people died, that was all really spectacular. But the part that held me was, before I did the trek, I volunteered with Bridges Between, with the woman who founded it, in a small village about 3 days hike down from Lukla, which is the starting point for Mount Everest. Okay. And I lived in that village for about 6 weeks. Limited electricity, absolutely no Wi-Fi, off of all of the trekkers' routes. There was nothing there. And we were hosting a women's literacy program there. So during the day, I worked in the fields with the locals, hung out, read books, and then at night, taught a little bit of Nepali, and well, somebody else taught the Nepali. I taught the English literacy.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So was there, so to do the work that you're doing today, how did you find the work that you're doing? Did you question some things in your own personal life, and that drew you towards wanting to work in the field that you're working in?
Um, No, I know there's so many books out there about people who had some life-changing event that was the catalyst for these great changes that they made in their
Yes.
life.
Yeah.
And those are very, very inspiring, I think, for a lot of people. But no, mine was just a gradual evolution. And I think that it was part of, not to be too Buddhist, but part of my karma, or as we would say in the West, part of my personality. It was just the direction that I was going to go. And my grandparents did work that was very similar to this. They lived in Guatemala as I was growing up, and hearing their stories and how they were teaching literacy and jobs training in small villages in southern Guatemala. My uncle was in the Peace Corps, hearing stories
Oh,
about the
wow.
work they were doing in parts of Northern Africa. So I think it was just, it seemed like something that is possible, is something that people do.
Yeah.
And I think that people who don't grow up around those types of stories see this kind of work as something that's impossible or
Yeah.
not possible for them. But my family made it so that it seemed like that's just a choice that some people make, and the choice that I ended up making. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So did you ever go down to Guatemala at all? Did you ever check that out?
No, that's really, it's the biggest irony of the whole story is a lot of my cousins did spend their summers in Guatemala, learn to speak Spanish, the whole thing. But my mom in particular was very afraid of letting us go to Guatemala, so we were never allowed.
Oh,
And
wow.
maybe that was part of the pull. It's like, I can't go, I really want to do this.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But you lived in China as well?
mhm,
Yeah. Did you do the
I
same
did.
work in China?
No, I was in China as an exchange student and a fellow. So I
Okay.
did archaeological and gender research while I was there for 1 year.
Okay. And what was that experience like living over there compared to Kathmandu?
Well, I was I moved there in 1996 or 7, something like that, when capitalism was really starting to take hold in China. And even the currency had changed. Before that, they had separate currency for foreigners, the yuan for locals and renminbi for foreigners. Hong Kong had just, I was there when Hong Kong was turned back over to China. Things were very different, and it seemed very exciting. And people were very kind and generous and wanting to get to know me on
Hmm.
that end. But at the same time, it was very oppressive, and the government still had such a heavy hand. All of my conversations in my apartment were being recorded. It
Oh,
wasn't
wow.
secret.
Yeah.
That was part of why I got to live there as a resident. They recorded my conversations. I had to check in and out every time I left. I had to tell the people who were in charge of me where I was going, when I would be back, signing in, signing out, all of those things.
Wow. Wow.
So I don't go to China anymore,
Yeah.
especially being a Buddhist. And Ray, we were talking a little bit about, studying Buddhism in Asia. And I think that being associated with the Mahayana tradition and having His Holiness the Dalai Lama as my ultimate guru has put me maybe into some situations in South China that are a little scary. So I don't
Sure.
even fly through China any longer.
Wow. Yeah. Is there, so how is it different from Kathmandu? I mean, is there, in a lot of these areas of the world, there's oppression, and I think that your work is about freeing people from feeling oppressed, or a lot of the stereotypes, and just what their whole cultural experience, and these are barriers that you're working to break through. So does it feel different in Nepal? Is it Does it feel freer? What's the difference?
Yeah, it feels completely free here. And then the people here, the mindset is more open as well. And people here are very, very trusting. Nepal and India as well. I've lived in India for just a small amount of time as well. And just the karma or the personality of the culture is one of trust and openness and willing to hear something new. So working in empowerment issues, I think in this part of Asia is much more soft
Yeah.
than say China.
Okay. And are you an avid hiker out there?
I try.
Yeah.
I try, but I spend a lot of time working on these programs and writing grants. It's a full-time job.
Yeah. Now, are you working within the schools? Do you go in the schools and work every day, or?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Our um, my platform is women's education.
Okay.
There's a lot of, the government is in charge of children's education. That is their job. And so if anybody wants to work in Nepal, I would suggest creating organizations that help to support the government in creating great schools for kids,
Okay.
not coming in and creating them for the government, because this is not a sustainable model.
Okay.
So what I do is I work with the women who were left out. So the children now in Nepal, more and more and more are having access to schools. It's not perfect,
Yeah.
but they are having access. But there's these generations of women who didn't have any access at all. And I was working in the village areas with literacy until after the earthquake. And after 2015, so many families fled their village areas thinking, well, I'll find a great job. There'll be more opportunities in the city, which is the human condition. People do that. And
Yeah.
they came to Kathmandu only to find that the 45% unemployment rate became more like 60 or 70% after the earthquake. Now, these people who came, if they had any education at all, it was very rudimentary and it was village education. They can't compete with Kathmandu people. And the families who came, the women, couldn't even read the bus signs. So then there was this great departure out of Kathmandu into the Middle East for these village men to find work, labor in the Middle East and construction jobs. And there was these hundreds of thousands of illiterate village women left in Kathmandu, oftentimes with small children, can't even read the bus, can't read the bottle of the medicine. They're at a severe disadvantage. Not being able to read in a village, it's okay, because most of your day you wouldn't need to access that. You have a very strong community. You're surrounded by your family. And so there's a huge support system. But if you're displaced and put into a metropolitan area and you can't read, you can just imagine the terror that these women are living through.
Sure.
So I moved our literacy programs down here to Kathmandu, where the need was so much greater.
That's awesome. I love that. So, and that's called Bridges Between. So people, and I'm going to put that at the end of the podcast too.
Thank you.
So that anybody who wants to find you, or can they donate through the website?
Yeah, Bridges Between, and then if you type in supporting women's education in Nepal, or even just Nepal, then we'll come up.
Okay, and I'll put that as well, supporting women's education.
Women's education.
So they know how to find you. Okay. So
thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We're a really tiny organization, but we're making some huge impacts here. And I think the longevity is what we can lean on. Most NGOs started by non-government organizations, charitable organizations in Nepal that are started by foreigners, even the large ones with a lot of capital, last no more than 3 years.
Okay.
And we've been here, I've been running this organization since 2013, but we have been here since 2011. So we're one of the longest running small NGOs in Nepal.
Wow, that's fantastic. But let me pull up, because there are people that have no idea where Nepal is. And I want to pull up a map. So let me do this here. So you're about halfway around the world from where we're at right now. So we're,
Oh.
yeah, so it's early in the morning. That's why you're drinking coffee, and I'm drinking tea. I'm drinking some
Yeah.
tea that has like some chamomile in it, so I'll sleep better, because last night I didn't sleep very well. Dealt with some insomnia, but
Thank you
there's
for
the
staying up late. It's really hard to communicate with North America because of that time difference.
yeah, that's true. It's that's very true. Figuring that out. So here is Nepal, and just above India, and it's right next to Bhutan, which happens to be the happiest place on the planet. So, and then just north of Bhutan, you have Tibet, which is the heart of Buddhism. It's a bit of a struggle there, but so it's a really wonderful region of the world, and the Himalayan mountains, Mount Everest is located in this particular region as well. So let's dive right in and find out, is Nepal affordable for people to move to live in?
Nepal is a very inexpensive place. But for retirement, like I think of, I'm 51, and I think how I can live here for quite a bit longer, but if certain pieces of infrastructure and development don't come to Kathmandu in the next 10 years, it's a very difficult place to live. Even just walking on the roads, it's complete chaos. There's no sidewalks. A lot of people every single day in Kathmandu are injured from walking on the streets because there's open holes, there's wires that hang low. And then the medical situation here is a little bit dubious. So before the pandemic, it didn't bother me, because Bumrungrad International Hospital in Bangkok, the best hospital in the world, if you ask me, is a 6-hour flight from Kathmandu. And then some amazing hospitals in Delhi, an hour and a half away from here by flight. But during the pandemic, we had no flights coming in and out of Kathmandu for almost 8 months, 7 to 8 months. And so even we expats we were locked in. We couldn't leave.
Yeah,
And there's some expats here who work for like big agencies, World Bank, UN, and that kind of thing. And of course, people like that can always come and go. But I'm a normal person, and I don't have a lot of money. So I was stuck here for almost a year, and the lack of medical care was really quite frightening. I
sure.
did get COVID
Mhm.
while here, but I got that Delta variant. So it was more of a neurological thing. It didn't affect my lungs or anything. So I stayed in my apartment.
Mhm. So the medical care in Kathmandu is have you been to the hospitals or anything for medical care there? Is it
Yeah.
affordable there?
Yes, it's definitely affordable, but it's not very high quality.
Gotcha.
So, but it's coming around. Like, a lot of people are talking about Dr. Ruitt, who I can't remember. Somebody helped him write a biography about his life, but he's the doctor who goes into the mountains and now into the Turai as well, fixing the cataracts, like thousands of cataracts within a weekend. He's created an entire new procedure. So this kind of thing is starting to be seen in Nepal. It's not that there isn't the the talent here, there just isn't the infrastructure to support the talent, because
Gotcha.
doctors here make less than a teacher does. I mean,
Wow.
they don't get paid very well, so you don't get a lot of people really ambitious to have that job here in Nepal.
Yeah. Dr. Ruitt, how do you spell his last name?
Ruit. And
R-U-I-T.
the
Okay.
name of his book is The Barefoot Doctor.
Barefoot Doctor. Okay.
Mhm. And I think that there's some short documentaries on Nat Geo and that about him. He's a pretty amazing guy. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll look him up.
So if you need cataract surgery or any type of eye surgery, Nepal is definitely your destination. But for like things like heart surgery, I would go to Bangkok.
Go to
Mhm.
Bangkok. Okay. I never knew that either, that Bangkok had such a great hospital there. I haven't.
Bumrungrad International, it's world class. Mhm.
Okay, good to know. All right. So what makes in this region of the world, we were showing the map, but what makes this place so special? So what draws people to that, to Kathmandu, to Nepal?
Yeah. Well, I think most people come here for the mountains, right? So trekking up to Everest Base Camp, you can take a 2-week holiday and do that with a trekking guide for a few $1,000s. So most people come here for that, as I did. But there's also Annapurna, which you can do a lot shorter treks. Some people come, unfortunately, in America, one of the other stressors is 2 weeks holidays per year.
Yes.
It takes 2 days to get to Kathmandu and a full day to get back home. So you've lost 3 days, and then there's severe jet lag because we are literally on the other side of the world.
Yes.
So give yourself another day or two.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about a 9 or 10 day holiday. So
Sure. Yeah.
it's a long ways to come.
Yeah. Do you think that the people, see, for me, when I think of Kathmandu, you're right, it's not on the radar for anybody who's interested in retiring, but it is on the radar for people who are interested in healing.
Yeah,
And that's what
true.
I think would draw people there, especially people that would want to retire. So most people think, oh, okay, maybe I'll go to Mexico, or maybe I'll go to a place in the Mediterranean or somewhere in Spain or France. But this is, to me, it's an extraordinary place because you have all of these temples and these it's a land of just where people can step into any of these places and learn and grow and develop. And to me, that's exciting. I love to be a part of a community that's pushing you to get to another level,
Yeah.
or can
That's
help
a
you.
really that's a good point, because I mentioned like the high dollar expats who are living here with the INGOs, the World Bank, and so on and so forth. But then there's a whole nother group of us who are spiritual seekers. And
Yeah.
I think when you're a spiritual seeker, you have less anxiety about things like, what's the hospital going to be like? Can I get all of the nice things that I want at any given time? So you have to have that mindset to be able to live here. And so there is a pretty large group of spiritual seekers here who have been here long term in Kathmandu.
Yeah.
And we don't have access to hospitals, but it just doesn't cause that type of anxiety that maybe, people who want to live abroad have to, ask themselves, is that something that I don't need? Is that something I can live without?
Sure.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's people, when I lived in Korea, there's a lot of people that go and they never even ate Korean food. So you knew that they were there
yeah.
temporarily, right? They're there and they never really,
Yeah.
they're not drawn to it. They don't want to, really, dive in. And you see those people, but they don't last very long. You're right. To me, the people that actually last in those destinations are people who truly immerse themselves in the culture and the food and really like it. And man, do I love Korean food.
Good
Good
for you.
stuff. But I love Indian
Nepali
food.
food is really good too.
I would
Nepali food is the
I
best.
I love Indian food. So I'm guessing it's very, very closely related to Indian food. Is that right?
But it's a little bit different. So the national food here is dal bhat, dal being lentils and bhat being rice.
Okay.
And so this is what you eat twice a day. So the lentils with the rice, but then you have the seasonal curry with it, just a little bit of curry, a little bit of pickle, maybe a little chapati. So it's an entire plate. And when it's served properly, it satisfies all of the tastes on your tongue, the
Yeah.
sweet and the sour and the
Yeah.
savory and everything. And it's filled with protein without necessarily having to order meat, although dal bhat can come with chicken. Mhm.
Okay. Are there a lot of vegetarians that live there in Nepal?
Of course, in this whole area of the world. And a lot of it has to do with spirituality, but quite frankly, most of it has to do with poverty.
Oh,
So
wow.
on average, people in Nepal in Kathmandu eat meat about twice a week. And then in
Okay.
the villages, significantly less.
Wow. Are you a vegetarian yourself?
I am.
You are. So
Yes.
you don't eat any fish or anything?
No, no.
Wow. See, I haven't eaten meat in about 20 years, but I still eat fish and I do feel guilty. And and I eat, like there's such a discipline to becoming a vegetarian because you got to give up like eggs, and I love eggs and I love
No,
cheese.
and I'm an American vegetarian, so I still eat eggs. And then there's so many different cultures here in Nepal. So vegetarian for the Nuar people, the indigenous people,
Mhm.
is they eat eggs. But the Hindu people, there's groups of Hindus here who consider vegetarian would mean that you don't eat any eggs either.
Okay. All right. So let's get to the talk about the living in the
Okay.
prices to live in Kathmandu or in around around Kathmandu, or maybe outside in the suburbs if you know. I mean, what can you get a flat for? And I'm going to ask you, can you buy and can you purchase a flat or a condo there?
No,
You can't.
no,
Okay.
no. So one of the barriers, I think, to becoming an expat here in Nepal is there's a closed economic structure. So money can't leave Nepal, right? So whatever you bring in here, expect to never take home with you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Money can't go.
Yeah.
And so they also are very traditional society in that foreigners cannot own land
Mhm.
or buy property unless you have a business visa, which is
Okay.
quite expensive at this point now. 500,000 US dollars in a Nepali bank account, and then you pay your your yearly visa fees, which is maybe $600 or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. And then you can purchase land as a business. But
Gotcha.
remember, it's a
Yeah.
closed economy, and so that $500,000 can never leave the country. So you have to kind of weigh that.
Right.
Most expats who do own land bought the land as a business before that $500,000 markup. It went from $50,000 just a few years ago to 500. And that is 100% due to the fact that the Chinese government is sponsoring Chinese businesses in Nepal.
Mhm.
And so there's no cap to what the Chinese government will pay for businesses to be here in Kathmandu. And so the government has just increased it
Wow.
tenfold.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that will definitely keep people from moving there and purchasing property for sure.
It's only really for Chinese anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're being sponsored with those
So
big numbers.
so that
Yeah.
pretty much leaves only rentals and flats. So what can you get like a comfortable, you look like you have a very nice apartment there.
People are so jealous of
It's
my flat.
it's gorgeous. Yeah.
I have a really big open flat in a historic area of Kathmandu called Patan. It's one of the palace cities. And I call it the Manhattan of Nepal, of Kathmandu. And then I live on Park Avenue
Oh,
of
wow.
Manhattan.
It's
So
how do you spell that? That is it Patan?
exactly.
Patan. Okay.
It's in the southern part of the Kathmandu Valley of the city.
Okay.
And it's one of the historic palaces. And then this area is famous for their artisans. So, and the indigenous people of Nepal are called Nuar people. And this
Yeah.
is where the Nuaris live.
Okay. No
So
worries.
they do metalwork and carving. And like these lamps behind me, these are very famous lamps that the Nuar people use. And then they do those lattice windows. So everything here looks very, very quaint and beautiful. And the Nuars are also Buddhist, but and even you, Ray, being, a scholar of Buddhism, it's very difficult to know anything about Nuar Buddhism. It was a tantric Buddhism, meaning hidden
Yeah.
Buddhism,
Yeah.
for many years. And the Nuaris started to hide their Buddhism when the British started to colonize, when the colonizing came closer and closer to Nepal, and they started coming through this region, the traditional communities locked it down
Mm-hmm.
from the British, and it just stayed locked down up until very recently. And now there's anthropologists and religious scholars just now starting to uncover this amazing type of Buddhism, which
Wow.
looks like a combination between Hinduism and Buddhism. So as you're walking through my neighborhood,
Wow.
you can't walk more than about 40 seconds, I'm not kidding, without running into a small temple or a god that is embedded into the ground or into the wall or something like this.
Wow. That's
Mhm.
like paradise for an anthropologist.
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, I would love that too. Just how you described it, I could see myself living there. What can you get for how much would you have to pay for a flat living
Oh,
in
okay.
in Patan?
Yeah, so I think that a new expat coming here for the first time, short-term rental, could probably have a place like what I'm looking at or what I'm seeing at for probably $500 a month.
Okay.
But after you're here for a while, I think you could cut that down quite a bit if you're willing to not take so many nice things. I have this apartment because I moved in at the pandemic when the owner was about to lose everything he had. And I made a deal. I paid, many months rent up front so that he had some capital. There was a lot of things going on in his family with COVID. And so I made a really great deal, and I can live here for less than $300 a month.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that takes relationships. And
Yeah.
also, my longevity gets me in through some doors that
Sure.
maybe a
Yeah.
newer expat couldn't access. But I would say if you really do think that you want to live here long term, budget higher at the beginning, and then realize that over the years, actually your budget would go down because you know people. And this is the
Sure.
way the economy works here.
Yeah, sure. Now, are you talking like, is that a 1-bedroom apartment?
Yeah, 1 bedroom, 2 bath, which is almost unheard of.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's wild. So, and I'm guessing are there studio apartments, just studios?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, for
and
sure.
those,
And if you wanted to live a little bit more luxury, I have friends at the UN who have that kind of
yeah.
income, and they pay $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month for a completely modern apartment that has heating and AC and balconies and those types of things. So
Hmm.
you can do that if that's what your comfort level wants.
Yeah.
You could also live in a local house. There's a lot of houses in Kathmandu are second homes
Hmm.
for the wealthy Sherpa people and
Yeah.
wealthy Nuar people. So a lot of houses are completely for rent, like the entire house with a garden, if that's what you want with a family. And there's several expats who live like that with kiddos.
Wow.
Mhm.
Can you find anything for like 100, 200, like room apartments in
Yes,
Kathmandu? You can, and they're
yes.
because for one person, a lot of times I wouldn't even need I had a tiny studio when I lived in Korea, and I lived in Seoul, Korea, and it was very, very small. And I lived in,
Yeah.
and I was coming from New York City, so I knew what small was. This was
Mhm.
even much smaller than anything that I had in New York
Mhm.
or my friends. So I mean, it was very, very small, but it was comfortable and cozy.
Mhm.
And I had friends over, and we sat around the table on the floor, and and had great discussions. And so yeah, I love that. I
There's
don't need a
really
lot.
almost anything that you could want. So there's Nepali families who live in these and expats can rent them, but like these little rooms where you share a kitchen with a few other families, whatever. You could even do something like that for
Yeah.
$40 a month.
See, I
I
would love
mean,
that. I love that because then I'm learning from the family, and they're teaching me,
yeah.
and I love to be a part of that. I've
And
done
you
that.
could rent from a family again for just like $100 a month. You could live in a beautiful, huge house with a garden with a Nepali family for $100 a month for sure.
Wow. And I bet you they'd even, have meals prepared
Yeah.
sometimes,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That is so on the apartments, the $500 apartments comparable to what you have, what's included in that? Does it include like water and electric, and do they come with air conditioning or?
No, most places would never come with any AC. The electric in Kathmandu is still unstable. We didn't have 24-hour electricity up until what was it, 2016 or 17? We
Oh,
had
wow. Okay.
yeah. So we only have had full-time electricity for a little while. So things are starting to evolve.
Yeah.
But most
Okay.
places at that level would never have any air conditioning or anything like that.
Yeah. And how do people get around Kathmandu? Do you have a car, or do you take bus or walk? Just walk.
I walk and take the bus, and then there's a lot of taxis.
Okay.
And then there's also Patao, which is a Bangladesh app, which is like our Uber, but
Oh,
they have
wow.
motorcycles. So say I wanted to take a trip to Boda, which is the big white stupa, Bodhanath stupa,
Okay.
in a taxi, in a car, it would cost me about 500 rupees or $4.80. But if I take the motorcycle, it would cost me about $1.80 to $2.
So you get on the back of a motorcycle? That's what
Yeah.
okay. How do you feel about that? Is it, you pretty comfortable?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
a little too comfortable sometimes. I can text while I'm on the back of a
Oh, wow.
motorcycle.
Do you wear a helmet too, or?
I only just started to for Christmas. An Italian friend who lives here, she sees me jump on the back of a motorcycle and it causes her heart palpitations. So she bought me a helmet for Christmas and asked me to start using it. So
Nice. And are there scooters big there, like Vespas or scooters?
Yeah,
They are.
scooties are, yeah, and they're quite affordable. So if an expat wanted to move here for even for the 5 or 6 month visa, you can get the tourist visa for it was 5 months, but I think they changed it to 6 since the pandemic. I'm not sure, but you could buy a scooty for $200 and
Wow.
resell it or gift it to a monastery when you leave. It's not
Yeah.
that big of an investment.
Okay. So it seems like everything is so incredibly affordable, but yet we talked about this before we started recording. There's a lot of people that go to, they're spiritual seekers, and they seek out places all over the world, but find temples that they can go live in, ashrams, Buddhist temples, and they stay for periods of time to heal. Tell me, do you know people that have done that, and how do you do it? Is it possible? And what's the pluses and what's the negatives of that experience?
So so there's Hindus and Buddhists here. The Buddhist population is actually only 9% in Nepal. This is not a Buddhist community, but
Yeah.
Buddhists come here because the Buddha Siddhartha was born here in Nepal. And so we do have a lot of monasteries, even though it's only 9%.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a number of ashrams, and I'm not as familiar with the Hindu ashrams because that's not my tradition.
Yeah.
But I have known some expats and backpackers who do go to the ashrams in, say, Pokhara or outside of Kathmandu. Mostly, I think that's for India. But here we do have a lot of Buddhist communities, and not all of them are open to expats. So just be aware, like you can't just walk into a Bihar, a Gompa, a monastery and ask to stay. I would look online first, and wherever your tradition is, I'm sure you could ask for a stay and a volunteerism. So my tradition is FPMT. So that's the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition. And that tradition started here in Nepal, and with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who is still with us here in Kathmandu, and his partner, Lama Yeshe, who passed away in the 1980s, and his reincarnation is living in Spain. So that's Kopan Monastery, which is the most famous monastery for foreigners coming here to Nepal, and that's on Kopan Hill. So Kopan offers famously the November course, which hasn't happened in 2 years because of the pandemic, but it's a 1-month retreat, intensive Buddhist study. And within the FPMT, one of our teachers, Venerable Rabina Korten, she always says, be your own therapist. And actually Lama Yeshe used to say that too. And it is Buddhism for Westerners, how we seek to change ourselves, and it has a lot less to do with ritualism. So it's a very Western style Buddhism. And FPMT also has 167 retreat centers and monastic communities around the world. And all of that is available online at their website. And a few years ago, so I've been volunteering with them for many years here in Kathmandu. We used to have a small meditation center closer to where the tourists go, and that closed during the pandemic. But I've also volunteered with them and lived within their monastic communities in Gold Coast, Australia, and then in Bihar, India, and then here in Kathmandu. But there's lots of opportunities, and you can apply for volunteerism. And sometimes they even have stipend positions for things like fundraising, event organization, that kind of thing.
Okay. And so do you know of anybody who's ever just decided that I want to try a retreat and never left? Because you can stay in the temples for free. I know a lot of people do that with the ashrams. I think there's like ashrams in upstate New York that I know some people. I met a guy through a meditation meetup group who he's from Australia, moved to America, lived in an ashram for 2 years in upstate New York, and now he's a really interesting guy. But there's a few other people that have spent some time at ashrams, and I don't know of anybody that's ever stayed or lived for long periods of time in a Buddhist temple. But it's a fascinating way to live, especially if you want to spend, a good amount of time really doing some self-exploration and breaking through some of the things that we all deal with and go through, and most people don't ever want to really look and reflect, so you're right, there's spiritual seekers. But do you know of anybody who's gone into any of those temples and never left, just kind of stayed and they live there and become a part of that community?
We know a lot of people who go into long-term retreat. That's a typical thing to do in Buddhism. But a lay person who is not affiliated with a tradition and doesn't have a teacher, I don't think that this is available to them necessarily in the Buddhist community. So maybe in the ashrams, something like that could happen. But even at FPMT, if you wanted to live in the retreat centers and volunteer, work, or go for a retreat, there's an application process. And you can imagine why.
Sure, yeah.
Because, mental health issues, addiction issues, those types of things are very detrimental to the community if those are allowed to let in the doors.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, so people are they have done that, and you're aware of people that have moved there and they're living in some temple somewhere. And there is no cost to live in a temple, correct?
Oh, there's cost for Westerners, yeah.
Oh, they are.
Especially if you wanted, if you're a spiritual seeker and you want a teacher, then your teacher would have to probably speak English. So now we're talking about a type of temple or a monastery that serves foreigners. And so there is cost affiliated with that. Okay. There's monasteries here that where you might be able to do something like that for far cheaper, but then you wouldn't have a teacher.
Gotcha. Do you have any idea what the costs are for people, for the viewers?
At Kopan Monastery, it's about $120 a week.
Okay. So if you go to Kopan Monastery and you are there for long term, they're going to ask you to pay $120 a week and volunteer to contribute to
No,
the.
that would be for retreat, personal retreat.
It would be. Okay.
Mhm.
So are there people that can just go and live in these communities and volunteer and become a part of the community for, say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months?
Yeah, but not at Kopan.
Not at Kopan,
Yeah.
but there are Buddhist monasteries that do that.
And within FPMT, yeah, there's a lot of retreat centers that do need full staff. But at Kopan, they have 350 monastics, ordained monastics. And so everybody has their karma yoga, which means that they have a job to do within the community. And so that's all taken care of by the monastics. But there's some retreat centers, like the one that I lived at for a while in Gold Coast, Australia, where there's a very limited amount of monastics, and they're all Western ordained, mostly women. And I think there was like 14 ordained, and they do have karma yoga, but Western monks and nuns are oftentimes of retired age. They don't become monks and nuns at age 25. And so the amount of work they can do is very limited. And so they do have to have full staff of people like you and I who have the ability to go and work and volunteer for 3 or 4 months and not pay, and then maybe even sometimes get a small stipend, but also be able to sit in on all of the teachings, which are in English, and all of that is free.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's so interesting. There's so many fascinating ways of experiencing healing out there. And I've never lived in an ashram. I don't think I ever will, but I know, like I said, I've met people that have, and they've always had, I've never heard of a bad experience of people doing that. I've never ever heard of anybody who's had a bad experience. And I know the Plum Village, which is Thich Nhat Hanh has a plum village in upstate New York.
South France. Okay.
There's one
Plum
up in
Village is in South France. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there's like an extension of that in upstate New York.
Okay.
And there was a Buddhist monk here in where I'm located, and he was saying you should go up there and do like a month-long retreat. And I was looking into it, and then COVID hit. And so it prevented me from doing it. But yeah, there's just so many interesting things. I'd love to just kind of immerse myself in that for a while. It'd be fascinating. So,
well, and we've been talking about Kathmandu, but I also spend a good percentage of my year in Lumbini, which is down south along the border of India, and it's considered part of the Terai, which is the lowlands of Nepal. And that's also the place where the Buddha was born, the Buddha that we know, Gautam Buddha, and then 2 other Buddhas were born in this sacred geography area. And this area has the space where the Buddha was born. King Ashoka from India has placed a marker there 1,000 years ago. And this is now called the Sacred Garden Area. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And then within the Sacred Garden, there are, I think, 40 monastic temples. And some of them do have rooms. And I think that something that you're talking about, like a long-term retreat, I think that would be a really good place to look into.
And the town
because
is
of
called Lumbini, Lubini,
Lumbini.
Loom. Okay.
Lumbini. And there is some information about Lumbini on my website, bridgesbetween.org, because we have an economic opportunity program there. And that is a full Hindu community with 10% Muslim. And then there's almost no Buddhists there. It's a really interesting dynamic to be in the birthplace of the Buddha and in this little enclave of Buddhists. And then all outside is Hindu and Islamic folks. And it's quite poor. It's very, very poor. And so you really get a taste of what real Nepal is like, because Kathmandu is like saying I've been to the United States because you've been to Manhattan. It's, it's part, but it's not the whole story.
Right. Right. How long does it take to get to Lumbini from Kathmandu?
13 hours on the bus,
Okay.
which costs about $10, or you can fly for 150 US dollars and be there in about 30 minutes.
Wow. How is the bus ride there? That
Well, the $10 bus ride is called the tourist bus. And it's okay. I've been living in Asia for a long time. So when I say it's okay, take it with a grain of salt. Some people are fine with it. And then some foreigners would just not want to do something like that. There
yeah.
are more luxurious buses, I think, for around the $30 range, but they haven't run since the pandemic.
Gotcha. Now, do they go through are there mountains that they go through? And
No, so from Kathmandu, you're actually going south and then along the Indian border.
gotcha.
So you go through the hills,
Okay.
which is
What's
quite nice. And then you go along Chitwan, which is the national forest where there's elephants and rhinoceroses. And it's a really beautiful forest. So
okay. And so
Nepal is very diverse. And I think when people think of Nepal, of course, we're going to think of Mount Everest. And then we think of that environment and we think
yes.
of Buddhists, but it's a very small percentage of actual Nepal.
Yeah. And I was doing a little bit of research before this podcast, and I was surprised because I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot of Hindus there, and there's a lot of ashrams there, and there's a lot of temples, Hindu temples. And then I was trying to dig up some of the Buddhist temples, right? And
Mhm.
so they're a little bit more hidden compared to the
Yeah.
Hindus. They're all over. Is there any conflict among the groups? No, they find a way
No,
to.
the
So it's different than.
religions are very cohesive. Although there is bigotry towards Islamic faith, as there seems to be in a lot of the world.
Yes.
So they are marginalized, people from that community. But where the marginalization really comes in is through the caste system. So in Nepal, they oftentimes say, well, we don't adhere to the caste system anymore, but it's not true. There's actual legislation to be inclusive because the caste system does exist. And violence against women is almost always exclusively in the lower caste areas, or in the lower caste families.
Sure.
So you can, even though Nepalis tell foreigners when they come here, and if a foreigner's here for 2 weeks, they think, oh, there is no caste system. I was told that many times. But if you live here and you live, trying to empower women, you see these issues, you're very, very strong, actually.
You're working directly with them, so you see them all the time. Yeah. You mentioned something about like there's some I don't know what you just said, but I was going to ask you about safety. Are there any safety concerns about, like, so people are always interested, the viewers are always interested, is it safe? Especially it is. There's not a lot of crime or anything there. Okay. And how about do they have policing there? What they do?
Yeah, there's policing and there's tourist police, but just like in a lot of under-industrialized nations or industrializing countries, the police system is not like North America. So don't come here thinking that police are here to help you. When you're in government service and when you're in a community where there's no upward mobility, this is the life you're going to live. Oftentimes people will take any advantage that they can get. So I am telling you a fact. I'm not creating a judgment here, but if a police officer sees an opportunity and they know that they're going to be poor their whole life, they might take advantage of that situation. So there is policing, but don't use it like you do in North America. But there's very little crime.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. So we haven't covered restaurants or food, and I'm guessing that the food is sensational, but what would it cost to go to like a typical restaurant in Kathmandu, Nepal, and have a typical
All bad.
Yeah, exactly. How much would it cost to go out to eat?
Yeah, so if you want to go for dalbat or momos, which are the dumpling things, in a local place, you would spend $1.80 to $2.50 for your meal. But then there's other options. So I cook mostly for myself, but when I do want to go out, it's because I want something from home or something. And so I'll go out for a sandwich. And there's a number of more modern places. And they're not just for expats, but there's some wealth coming into Kathmandu, especially because so many Nepalis go and work abroad, and then they've come back and they've seen, how comfortable a Starbucks is.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
saying spend your money there, but come on, it's comfortable. It's warm when it's cold outside. It's cool when it's hot outside. You know what you're going to order. It's clean. There's a bathroom. And so there are places that have mimicked Western style cafes. And if you want a sandwich and a beautiful latte, you could spend $7.
Yeah. Okay. So are there any other costs that we haven't discussed? So we discussed medical care. We discussed the food. Clearly you can get stuff for $50 to $500 or even more per rent. We didn't talk about like utilities. Do you pay utilities there? Or are they included in the rent?
Most of the time they're going to be included, especially for foreigners. But if you stay here longer and you start living, as I said, you start, decreasing your budget, then you might get into an apartment where you have to pay your utilities. And then I would budget another $5 or $6 per month.
Wow. So, I mean, you can easily live on, it looks like you could probably easily live comfortably on $500-600 a month, especially
Yeah, I think so.
if you choose to live in one of the homes.
Yes. Yes, but of course you also get a little bit what you pay for. So when you pay for your utilities, the water systems here, they don't have underground water systems. So everything is through a cistern. So your apartment building or your house would have to have the cistern filled once a week or once every 10 days. And then you have to have pump the water up to the tanks, which are on your roof. And then they're gravity fed. So you oftentimes run out of water. And what if the government doesn't come to fill the cistern? I mentioned the electricity. We have 24-hour electricity, which means that it only goes out a little bit, but your electricity will go out every single day. That's just the way. But now it's only for 20 minutes or a half an hour, where it used to be we only had electricity 4 hours a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And what do you do for fun what do you do for fun? What do people do? So like if people really want to move there, what can they do?
There's a lot of farmers markets now for the wealthy Nepalis and the expats go to. And if you're on a tight budget, you can just hang out at the farmer's market, get yourself a cup of coffee for $1, and people watch and do that kind of thing in a nice environment. But if you have a budget, trekking, but that is not budget friendly. So a lot of the locals, and especially people like me who are here for NGO work or spiritual seeking, we don't have that kind of money. But trekking to Everest Base Camp, if you have the time, you can do it cheaper. But if you don't, it's a very expensive ordeal because the flights are $370 round trip from Kathmandu to Lukla, and there is no possible way to get any discount. It doesn't matter what your visa is. Now, the flights cost the same from everywhere in Kathmandu, much like Bangkok. You take your flight, it always costs the same. However, to those less tourist areas, it's oftentimes you can just ask for a discount for the Indian discount or the resident discount, and you can fly to places like Lumbini for much cheaper. But again, you'd have to be here for a while to know those types of things.
Right. How long does it take you to get to Mount Everest by bus?
It's not possible.
It isn't possible.
There's no roads. No.
Oh, wow. So you got to jump on a plane.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it before by taking a Jeep to Poplu, which is another airstrip. But back then it was dirt, but now it's paved. And you can take your Jeep or your bus to Poplu, and now they're building the road a little bit further. But even once you get off of the vehicle, if you don't want to spend any money on flying, now you've added about 2 days to your trek to Lukla. And then from Lukla, you have about 9 days trekking up to Everest Base Camp.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else, Katherine, that you'd like to share about Nepal that we didn't cover to that would be helpful for our viewers tuning in? Anything else?
Yeah, I know something that a lot of people ask about is volunteerism. So volunteerism is actually illegal in Nepal unless you apply for a visa specifically for volunteering. And I've never known anybody to ever get this visa. So I would just count it out.
Okay.
I would just come here on a tour. Well, no matter what you do, you have to come here on a tourist visa.
Right. Yeah.
And then you can switch your visa to the business visa or your student visa or something like this. But come here on your regular tourist visa. And if you want to volunteer, and if you know what you're doing, then you can volunteer a little bit under the table. Just keep it to yourself, because it is illegal and you can be deported. And you could even go to jail, quite frankly. So just keep it to yourself. I've seen some people come here and they're advertising it on Facebook the way that they're volunteering, and they don't realize that the government is watching that. So volunteering is a good thing to do, I think, as long as you keep it in sustainable development models. So building structures or working on infrastructure is not sustainable. Nepalis know how to build. So don't come here and build stuff. Maybe bring money to build stuff and help out. But if you're bringing a big group and you're building houses, that means Nepalis don't have a job to build a house. And then also working in orphanages is actually not something that we want to do internationally, because you will be fooled. You will think this is a true orphanage and these are houses for human trafficking. So even if it is a legitimate orphanage, when other people see Westerners coming to an orphanage and spending time and leaving a bunch of money, this creates the industry for human trafficking. So I really suggest staying away from working with children and people who can't make choices for themselves. It's another reason why, you know, we do such great work here in Nepal, is because we're working with adults. And when we say, what is it that you need? We can have an adult conversation and we can figure out what the need is. When you're working with children, you're coming in and you're sort of making the plan yourself, and you might not understand what the need is.
Sure. Yeah, that's great information. Terrific information. So the visas, the tourist visas, how long do they last before they?
On arrival is 90 days for
90 days.
$125, but then you can extend it up to, like I say, it's definitely 5 months. But I think that they changed the laws to 6 months during the pandemic, but the laws are constantly changing.
Okay. So you don't have to leave the country after 90 days.
Correct. You just go down to immigration and buy another.
Okay. All right. Terrific information.
But the law right now still is that it's a 5-month visa in 1 calendar year. So a lot of people get themselves into trouble because in India, you know, you can get your 90 days visa. You just have to leave the country and pop back in. So there's not a maximum amount of days per year. Yes. But here in Nepal, that's not the case. It's 5 months per calendar year. So if you want to stay for 10 months, you need to organize it the 5 months before January and then the 5 months after, but then you have to leave. And another way that folks can stay here long-term is to do research or study. So the student visa is available for 1 year. The United States used to have a reciprocity visa where you could pay the same for 1 year as for 5 years. So you could get a 5-year visa, but your viewers will have to look into that because, again, the laws are constantly changing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So after the 5 months are up, or possibly 6 months, Can you leave the country and come back in the next day, like a lot of people?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not
Okay.
like India. You
Gotcha.
have to leave and you cannot come back in until the next calendar year, until January 1st.
I see.
And that's where,
Okay.
and Nepal is not negotiable with these types of things. And
Yeah.
you would pay $3 per day when you extend your visa. I mean, when you overstay your visa. And I've heard of foreigners thinking, I'll just pay the fee when I leave. One, you can't pay at the airport. So what you'll do is you'll end up missing your flight and losing your $1,000 ticket. And two, they will charge you those $3 per day. And I've heard foreigners having to pay thousands of dollars to leave the country.
Wow. Okay. Good information.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
right.
harsh, but if you just follow the rules, then it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any Airbnb going on there?
Mm-hmm.
There is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
There's Airbnb and then booking.com. But again, you will pay the maximum you will ever pay.
Sure.
When you book our Airbnb. But if you feel comfortable, book that way for just a short amount of time and then come here and then negotiate the lower prices.
Sure. Okay. And what's the average temperature year round there?
Well, right now it's about 63 degrees.
Okay.
It doesn't get very cold. Kathmandu Valley is literally a paradise. Like, it doesn't get too cold, it doesn't get too hot. And year-round growing seasons, if this weren't a metropolitan area, like in the 1980s, this was all growing.
Wow.
So they had rice and sorghum and vegetables. It's quite a paradise. However, the infrastructure is completely lacking. So even though it's 60 degrees, I'm wearing 2 sweaters and a scarf because the walls are just brick. So
Yeah.
It's actually colder inside oftentimes than it is outside.
Wow. Do you have heat there?
No.
You don't have heat. Okay. And how cool does it get down to at night?
Well, it'll get down into the 40s or the 30s. So it's really quite cold, and it can be a little bit uncomfortable. And I mentioned Lumbini, which is an amazing area. And I've also lived on the other side of Lumbini in Bihar in India. And the temperature does not drop that low, but the humidity is like 80-something%. And this cloud comes down and you just feel very cold and uncomfortable for quite some time. So
okay.
maybe 4 or 5 weeks. Here in Nepal, they have 6 seasons, not 4.
Oh,
and
wow.
Each season lasts 2 months.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. All right. Well, Katherine Demsky, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this. I appreciate it very much. Katherine is, again, she's the executive director at Bridges Between, and you can find them at bridgesbetween.org. And they are doing terrific things in Nepal. Thanks again for being here. I truly appreciate all your wisdom and your tips and your views on Kathmandu and all over Nepal. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Thanks, Ray. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
We'll see you in Nepal, okay?
I hope to be there one day, and I'm gonna look you up.
Okay, great.
Okay, awesome. Take care.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.